So as a kid, I absolutely loved the movie The Sandlot. And if you've never seen it, I almost want to make it a requirement that you should go home and tell your parents that you need to watch this because it's good history and everything. But I mean, I could watch that movie over and over and over. I mean, Benny the Jet Rodriguez was probably one of my idols. I mean, I just wanted to be like him because he was so cool with his hair, the way he flipped it, and he was athletic and sporty. I mean, if I just had a pair of PF Flyers, like my life would have been great. It would have been awesome. And I can just recite almost every single line if I were to watch that movie now, just because I did watch it so much. But if you've never seen the movie, the basic plot line is this, that an unathletic kid comes to this new city. He's the new kid in town, and he gets invited by none other than Benny the Jet Rodriguez, who lives across the street, to come play baseball with them. And of course, he doesn't know how to play baseball. He doesn't know how to catch a ball. He doesn't know how to throw a ball. But eventually, he ends up being part of the team. Eventually, he ends up being part of the group. And one day, as they're playing baseball, Benny the Jet Rodriguez, again, smacks this home run or smacks this ball so hard that it busts its guts open. Like the inside of the ball and the leather from the outside just come open. They take it as this omen of something's going to happen. We don't know what it is, but Benny's like, the only thing this means is that we can't play baseball anymore. You got a ball, you got a ball, you got a ball. And Smalls, the new kid in town, is like, yeah, I got a ball. And then everybody's like, well, go get it. And so he runs home to go get it. Now, the only problem is that this ball happens to be his stepdad's ball. And it's no ordinary ball because this ball is signed by Babe Ruth. And so he brings it out to the Sandlot where they play baseball, and he knocks it over the fence. Home run. And he's just freaking out. He's like, oh my God, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. Oh my God, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. And everybody's like, what's going on? And they're like, maybe it was just too much for him, man. His first homer and everything. And he's like, no, you don't get it. That's not my ball. And everybody's like, what do you mean it's not your ball? And he goes on to this whole rant. He's like, it was my stepdad's, and it was signed by some lady, by baby Ruthie. And everybody's like, what? And it's like, do you mean Babe Ruth? And everybody's like, yeah. And everyone freaks out, and they're going to jump over the fence. But the only problem is that there's this huge dog. They call it the Beast. This mammoth of a dog who will eat anybody who will dare jump the fence. Bones and all. I'm just quoting so many lines from this movie because I remember it so well. But, so they come up with all these strategies of how are we going to get this ball back? And Small's like, well, why don't we just go over and knock on the door and ask for the ball? And it was like, what, are you crazy? The guy who lives there is worse than the Beast himself. They're like, you can't do that. And so they come up with, again, all these crazy ideas of how to get the ball back. And I don't know how to do it without ruining the ending, but basically, they get the ball back. And when they get the ball back, they find out that the dog nor the owner are that bad of people. They actually become friends. And maybe that's ruining a little bit of the ending, but you can go see it anyway because it's a great movie. But the reason I share this with you is because isn't it weird that when things go wrong, we naturally go to the worst possibilities? That when things go bad, we go to oh no, my stepdad's going to kill me. Oh no, we can't do this. And it's we play out all these things that could happen, and they're all really, really bad things. And what happens is that as things get worse, the things that we have faith in, we start to lose faith in those things. Because again, our circumstances are getting lower, our circumstances are getting worse. And so we're like, how are we going to get through this? The thing that I had faith in before, I'm losing a little bit of faith in that every single time things start to get worse. And isn't this true with God? That as our circumstances fall, as our circumstances fail, so does our faith. Our faith will start to fail. Our faith will start to fall. Because as our circumstances lead us, so will our faith. And I just want you to know that you are not alone when this happens. That I will tell you this. But also Peter, the guy who walked with Jesus, would tell you this. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But take a second and think about this. Think about a time that you messed up and you played out all the consequences that would happen because of what you did, because of your mistake. But in the end, things turned out not to be that bad. And why do you think it is that we jump to the worst case scenario? Why is that? So we're in this series, A Kingdom Not Too Far, and basically we're looking at Peter's experience that he's dictating to this guy named Mark and how we got the gospel Mark. But Peter is basically on his last leg. He's in jail. He's probably going to die. And he's giving us his story, that this guy Jesus was more than just a man. This guy Jesus was more than just a prophet. This guy Jesus was more than just a teacher. And in fact, he starts off his gospel by saying, here is the good news about Jesus, the Son of God. And that Jesus, when he would go around teaching, he would have almost this theme to his teachings, that his teaching would be like, the time has come. The kingdom of God is near. Repent and believe the good news. And it was almost like Peter was saying, like over and over, wherever he was at, as the crowds grew and as he interacted with people, this was the thing that he went back to over and over and over, that Jesus was bringing this kingdom that no one would ever expect. That the kingdom that Jesus was bringing for, everyone hoped for and everyone prayed for, but when Jesus brought it, no one expected it to look and be the way that it was. Because the kingdom that Jesus was bringing was something vastly different, that it wasn't just a kingdom that you could touch, it wasn't a kingdom that you could see, but it was a kingdom of heart. And if you remember that, Jesus kept saying like that his kingdom would be different, that it would be like nothing you've ever experienced, that you would have to repent and believe that you couldn't mix and match these things, but it would be something completely new. And as this kingdom would come, like Jesus would leave these breadcrumbs of like how it would be different. I mean, if you remember from a few weeks ago or whatever, that Jesus would talk about, what would it mean if people leverage their power different? Because we all know how people leverage their power. We all know how people leverage their influence, their money, their popularity, whatever it might be. It's all in benefiting themselves. They'll use whatever it is that they have to say, like, I'm just going to better myself a little bit. I'm going to better my standing. I'm going to better my power. I'm going to have more money, whatever it might be. He says, you know how this works. You know how things are set up, in which we could all say like, okay, yeah, I can definitely see how people use their standing, their power, their influence, their money to benefit themselves. But Jesus looks at his kingdom and the people in his kingdom and he says, not so with you. Again, Jesus is bringing this new kingdom and things are going to look different. The people in his kingdom are going to do things differently. That the way that they're going to leverage what they have, the way that they're going to leverage their power, their money, their influence, whatever it is that they have, is going to be for the benefit of others. I mean, and we believe this here at Forum, here at FBCC. We believe this to be true. I mean, this is why it's built into part of the four, core principles of Forum 12v2, that found people will go out and find people. Not to benefit themselves, but to benefit others. That saved people will serve people. Again, leveraging what we have to better someone else. You can't do life alone. Life is hard, and life isn't a life worth living if you can't do it with somebody. And growing people change. That will let the gospel change us from the inside out. And when Jesus was with the crowds, he starts talking about these priorities, and the question that came up was, what was the greatest commandment? What is the greatest commandment, Jesus? There are so many laws, there's so many commandments that we should be following, 613 of them. But if I only had to choose one, what would it be? And Jesus talked about, well, you want the one, but there's actually two, and the two actually make up the one. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Something they would definitely know, something they would have written everywhere, something they would have ingrained in their minds. But then he, expounds that in a little bit more. He goes, that's the thing. But the second thing is this, to love your neighbor as yourself. Again, you asked for one, but there's actually two, and the two actually make up the one. That if you want to love God, it's by loving others. And if you really want to love others, you have to understand that it's by loving God. And it's this weird mixture of like, okay, this is what it's all about. This is the thing that I should be doing. If I want to leverage my power, my influence, my popularity, whatever it is, it's to love God and to love others. And I don't know if you've been reading all the stuff in between what we've been talking about in the Gospel of Mark, but I encourage you guys to do so because there's so many cool little things, little nuggets, little just, events that happen that we haven't talked about yet. So I encourage you to do it. I mean, it's like Jesus, again, calling out those religious people and saying, you haven't read your Bibles. You don't know what you're talking about. And another thing is like the destruction of the temple, something that people thought would never happen, could never happen. Jesus talks about it. And the crazy thing about that is that we actually have the date of when this actually happened. 70 AD is the day that this actually took place. And Jesus predicted it in great detail of what this would be like. And so to read that is almost like, man, Jesus actually knew what he was talking about. But now we're getting to a place where all of this comes to a stop. All of the excitement, all of the crowds, all of the hoopla, if you want to say that, like it finally comes to a stop. And the reason is because circumstances start to change. And as circumstances start to fall, so do people's faith. It's not unique to me. It's not going to be unique to you. And it definitely wasn't unique to people 2,000 years ago. Jesus and his disciples are finally in Jerusalem and it's Passover week. They're remembering the week that they were led out of Egypt. And so they're having this dinner. And all those things that Jesus warned them about people, taking him and spitting on him and rejecting him and how the religious people would come and arrest him and ultimately be killed. All of this will start to take place. It'll start connecting all the dots. So Jesus and his disciples are in this room and they're having their Passover dinner. And then Jesus starts to be, Jesus. I mean, things get a little bit weird. I mean, he's looking at the 12 at this dinner. And he's sitting there, they're doing their thing, maybe having side conversations. But then Jesus starts to speak up and he says, one of you at this table will betray me. And you have to imagine for a second the silence in that room. Who's going to betray him? It's not me. Is it him? Is it him? Who's going to betray Jesus? And so the night kind of continues and he says, listen, guys, here, take this bread. And he passes the bread around. And people are about to take a bite of this bread. And he goes, this bread is my body. And I bet you Peter at that moment would give a little side note and be like, and when he said that, we all kind of paused. We all kind of took a second and second guessed if we wanted to take a bite of that bread. But they did. And then Jesus takes a cup and he pours some wine in and he's like, here, drink up, guys, come on. We're having dinner. Everyone take a drink. And everyone takes a drink. And then right after everyone takes a drink, he says, and this cup is my blood. And again, I bet you Peter would pause for a second and look at everybody and be like, man, what kind of prank is this? Like, this is the worst kind of prank ever. We're eating your body, now we're drinking your blood. Like, what is this all about? And again, Jesus is being Jesus, and he expounds on this. He says, this is my blood of my covenant. This is the blood of the covenant. So Jesus is making this new covenant with people. Jesus is doing something new again. And he said that this covenant would be for everybody. That this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. So Jesus is making this promise. Jesus is making this covenant where he would pay the price to pay for many. And then, of course, it's pretty heavy. I mean, Jesus being Jesus, and he's like, you're going to betray me. This is my body. This is my blood. Things are pretty heavy at that moment. So he's like, okay, let's sing a hymn for a second. Let's lighten the mood. And so they sing this hymn and things are like, okay, let's get back into the spirit of things. We're remembering we're getting out of Egypt. And then Jesus, again, goes back to being Jesus, and they're sitting with each other. And it's so interesting that Peter would put this in, and I imagine him looking at Mark and saying, okay, listen, Mark, you have to pay attention to this part because it's super important that you write this down. And Mark's like, okay, well, what is it? And he's like, at this dinner, Jesus looked at me, and he told me not once, not twice, but 3 times that I would deny him. before the rooster crowed that morning. And I got to tell you, Mark, that when he said that to me, it blew my mind, and I had to keep telling him, there's no way that would happen. Not me, Jesus. If anyone else, but not me. I would never deny you. I would never leave you. I don't know what you're talking about, Jesus, but not me. You're wrong in this one. But Mark, I have to tell you the truth. I just didn't know what I didn't know. Because after that dinner, they would come for him. And they would arrest him. And when they took him, I got scared. And I took out a knife and I tried to, defend Jesus, but I didn't know what I was doing. I chopped off a guy's ear, and then Jesus healed that guy's ear. And then after that, I ran. And not only me, but it was everybody. Everybody fled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. Circumstances were changing, and everyone got scared. And I love what the next verse says, because it says, a young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. And I look at this and I think of it as like Peter's way of lightening the mood. He's like, listen, I didn't know what I didn't know, and circumstances were changing, and I got scared, and I fled, and everyone else fled, but so did the naked guy. Like the naked guy fled, running as fast as he could because he was all naked and stuff. It's a heavy moment. But here's the thing that I want us to think about. Here's the thing that's true for me, and that's true for you, and that was true for them 2,000 years ago. What will you do when your circumstances start to change? What will you do when your circumstances start to crumble, deteriorate, fall, get worse? Because Peter, the guy who walked with Jesus, the one who said, I would never flee, I would never leave, I would never betray you, I would never deny you. The 12 guys who walked with Jesus fled. The 12 guys who walked with Jesus walked away. And if they can, so can I, and so can you. Because sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, and circumstances will change. And this is the part where most people don't warn you about when it comes to your faith. This is the part that people don't talk about too much, because people love to talk about the Jesus high. You come from camp, or you come from Mexico, you come from a service project, and you're just like, man, Jesus is so cool. You're a Christian for the first time, you accept him, you get baptized, and you're like, man, you're on this high of like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But then things start to change. You don't feel the same way that you did before, and you get these lows. And not many people share those moments because, well, they don't like to. They don't like that feeling. But as our circumstances change, so will your faith. When we don't feel Jesus like we once did, we'll ask questions like, am I doing this right? Are you actually there? Like, what's going on? When our expectation and experience don't line up, what will we do? Because we expect God to act in certain ways. And when we do those certain things, this should happen. And it should look like this. God, I want to try to glorify you in everything I do in my life. Like I want to love you, and I want to love others. And if I'm loving you and if I'm loving others, then here comes the expectation. Then things should be easier. Then things should be different. That I should be almost rewarded by the easiness or the convenience or whatever it is in life, because I'm loving you and I'm loving God and I'm loving others, and like I'm doing all the right things. Like things should be different than what they are now, right? But then our experiences life is hard. I don't feel loved, and I don't feel wanted, and I don't feel seen, and I don't feel heard, and I don't feel cared for. Again, the expectation is if I love God and I love others, then life should be easy. But when I'm loving God and I'm loving others, but then the circumstances start to like crumble and get like worse and worse and worse, we feel like something's wrong. We feel like we're doing something wrong. And trust me, we'll all go through this. I've gone through this. You will go through this. Again, people 2,000 years ago went through this. But the question always is, what will you turn to? Who will you turn to? What will you flee to? Who will you flee to? And to end this, I kind of want to end on an encouraging note, and something for you to think about is the same people who left Jesus that night, the same people who ran, who just had dinner with him, who didn't listen to the warnings of him being seized and ultimately being killed, those people who ran ultimately came back to those places they ran from. They ultimately came back to those places where they feared for their lives. And not that the sense that danger was gone, because there was still danger there. They were still, a chance that they would lose their life. But yet they went back into those places and shared the good news of Jesus, which we will talk about more next week. So think about it. Where and who will you flee to when your circumstances change? When the expectation and experience don't match, how will you react?